Okay, hello and welcome to this webinar on AI in education. My name is William O'Gorman and I will be moderating this webinar today. Greetings from blue sky, sunny and slightly cold Helsinki, but I hope that the information that we have today will warm your intellectual hearts as well. We're very privileged to have an array of speakers as part of the Ulysses Alliance, and what we would really like is that if any of our participants have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask questions in the YouTube chat directed towards the speakers, and I will then take those questions and our speakers can answer them for you. It would be great if we could somehow maybe generate a conversation on this topic. I think it's a very hot topic at the moment, so all questions and comments are greatly appreciated. So I'm going to kick off by showing a presentation just to give a background about the webinar and also about Ulysses and the Compass project as well. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So I'd like to welcome you all once more to our AI in Education webinar. And this webinar is hosted by Hage Helia, and I will moderate it. My name is William O'Gorman, AI Innovation Hub Officer. So just 2 seconds. Sorry. Nope. Hold on. Okay. And this webinar is hosted as part of the Compass project. So this roundtable is part of the calendar of activities. Compass leading Ulysses to become a European university model of excellence through research and innovation. And Compass is a Horizon 2020 project of Ulysses and the flagship for its research and innovation agenda and strategy. Ulysses is a unique unit. It consists of 6 innovation hubs, which will tackle 6 research and innovation challenges, creating one ecosystem, innovation ecosystem. Up north, we have Hage Helia, and we are dealing with artificial intelligence. In Slovakia, in Košice, our hub is dealing with digitalization in the Technical University of Košice. In MCI, the Entrepreneurial School at Innsbruck, their hub is dealing with food, biotechnology, and circular economy. In University of Genoa, their hub is dealing with tourism, arts, and heritage. In University Côte d'Azur in the south of France, they're dealing with aging and well-being. And then in University of Sevilla in Spain, they're dealing with energy, transport, mobility, and smart cities. And together, these 6 innovation hubs form the Ulysses innovation ecosystem. Hage Helia's topic is artificial intelligence. And I think it has been a topic that has grown in the time that Ulysses has existed. And at the moment, it is extremely relevant to how our world works, to solving societal challenges. And of course, it's transferring revolutionary role in AI as well. A little bit about our webinar for today. We're going to have 3 different presentations and about 20 minutes per speaker. For each speaker, there will be a time allotted of about 5 to 10 minutes for questions directed to the speaker. Please ask your questions in YouTube or make any comments and they'll be passed on to me and I will ask the questions for you. And then at the end also, we will hopefully have a 5 to 10 minute open conversation between all of our speakers. And in addition, the webinar will be recorded and available on the Ulysses YouTube channel, where you can also see our previously recorded webinar on human-centric AI. So I think it's quite interesting for you. But you're not here to listen to me today. We have some excellent speakers for you. We have Merja Alanko-Turinen, who is a principal lecturer here in Hage Helia in the School of Vocational Teacher Education. She is going to give us a presentation on the topic of Towards Entangled Sustainable Higher Education AI Solutions. Our next speaker is going to represent the Eximia OU company. This is Pasi Petaya. He's going to be talking about AI applications for tutoring students and providing personalized online learning. And then finally, we have 2 speakers from University of Côte d'Azur, Margarida Romero, full professor in University of Côte d'Azur and associate professor in University Laval in Canada, and Lauren Heiser, associate professor in INSPE de Nice, University Côte d'Azur. And they're going to co-host a presentation on the creative uses of AI in education. So I'll stop sharing now, and I will hand the floor over to Merja. And if anybody has any questions, then please don't hesitate to ask in YouTube and we'll take care of it. So Merja, how are we doing? Is the sharing working?
Yes, I hope that you can see my slides. And hello, dear friends. And let me start by asking a few questions. I would like to invite you to reflect on the question of how ready are you to reinvent your role as an educator and learn about AI, meaning AI literacy and understanding what AI is. And secondly, how ready are you to learn about and teach with AI? And thirdly, how ready are you to learn from human AI collaboration? That means live in a world that is increasingly integrated with AI. So we start with these questions, and I hope that you will keep this in your mind when we land the process. So as William nicely told us, my topic is towards entangled sustainable higher education AI solutions. And I will give you some sort of an outline of the presentations, how I will be going through these topics and how we will land to the concluding remarks. So first of all, I will position myself. So where do I come from? What is my take on this topic? And set the scene for the presentation. Then I move on to a research project I have just submitted for peer review. I did a scoping review, which tried to reveal how AI is discussed in higher education discourse. And based on that, I will give you some guidelines for entangled AI pedagogy. And from this kind of general, I call to practical, or this kind of experimentations that we are doing at Haaga-Helia. So how we have been using the guidelines I just mentioned in our script-based chatbot experimentations and how we've used them in exam assessment. And then I will take you to the concluding remarks and I left you with the references that I have used. And I hope this is okay. I can't hear any conflicting ideas for my presentation, so I will continue with this. So I position myself coming from the pedagogical background. So I have been working within vocational education and vocational teacher education over 30 years. So I have found interesting to research and discuss topics like designing for learning, digitalization in higher education. And now, as we are now talking about AI, this is something that, as William mentioned, that so much is happening. So there is time before AI and after AI. So I will not be discussing ChatGPT for today, but I hope that others will. So I do this kind of a longer process. So I'm not in this topical theme of ChatGPT, but this is something that everybody's talking if we talk about AI. And then I just remind you that I've been discussing quite a lot of competence-based education, and I find lots of kicks from digital and graphics facilitation. So just remembering that I come from the pedagogical background and I am not that tech savvy, but I do use all the gadgets and gizmos that are available, and I'm curious to find out how they work. So let's move on to the scene. So if I came from that positioning, so the setting the scene. So I mentioned that at Haaga-Helia we are doing all kinds of experimentations, and one platform for this kind of experimentations is AI Driver project that is financed by the Ministry of Education and Culture, and I'm part of the project group. And the aim of this AI Driver project is to deepen the knowledge base of designing, adopting ethical human AI interaction in education of professionals. And I have bolded that because I'm working within that part. My colleagues, Ari Alemäki and others are working within the SMEs and how business will be in a way integrated to this process. And as I mentioned that I'm working with this educational perspective of the project, then our work package consists of ideas and things that we have to understand where we're coming from. So consolidating the knowledge base of how AI has been discussed and how do you take it as a part in your design and orchestration process when you work with those education of professionals. And of course, we have to use AI in open education and lifelong learning as well. And as the title of my presentation gives you an idea, so I come from the idea that you can't say that it's tech that drives pedagogy, or you can't say that it's pedagogy that drives tech, but you have to move on. And last summer when I was running, I was listening to Tim Fawn's exciting seminar via Zoom, and running and listening to him, and found out that this way of how he in a way put together this entanglement. So how these two things, they shape each other. So you have technology, you have the pedagogy, and you have to see tech as multiple contextual and relational. And the students, the teachers, and other infrastructure persons and policymakers, they have to negotiate how they are done together, and understanding that this is a very complex process where you need configuration skills, you need design skills, you need orchestration skills, and all kinds of practices where they are working together. And as in the slide, the aspirational is that there is this kind of understanding that this calls for uncertainty, embracement, perfection, opens the honesty, understanding that this is something that you have to lean on, and understand that it's not only educators, it's students and educators together working to understand what kind of future do we have in AI. So that gives me in a way, this kind of theoretical background, so how I see technology and pedagogy entangled. And based on that, I wanted to ask a question in my scoping review, that how do different reviews, as there are lots of them in scientific journals, how do they see AI solutions in higher education pedagogy generally, and then propose some future research themes in particular. So understanding where do we come from, what is the history, so where then we can move on, understanding what has happened so far and what will be the next steps to be taken. And as I mentioned, it is a scoping review, and it's inspired by certain scoping review researchers. And based on what they have told us, that how you do a proper scoping review, I, of course, identified the research questions that I just mentioned, and the relevant concepts were defined. And then I moved into the databases. So I used the databases Haaga-Helia has, the Finna, and I looked for articles, review articles from 2017 to 2022. And I used certain keywords: artificial intelligence, higher education, pedagogy, meta-analysis, review. And then I found out over 400 articles, and then I had to include and exclude some of them. So in a way, I had to decide that they are peer-reviewed, and they have these topics that I find interesting in them. So they have a bigger picture. So it's not just in healthcare, but they have to be in a higher education pedagogy on the general level. So I included then 15 articles to my process, which I then analyze and summarize and try to find out answers to my questions. And an interesting part of this kind of scoping review is that you have to do a consultation exercise where you invite those who are stakeholders in your process to, in a way, check out what you have done, and based on that, then finalize the article. So these were the articles that I chose for my analysis. So lots of things happening there with different kinds of review processes. There might be systematic reviews, meta-analysis, bibliometric studies, and reviews done by AI. So lots of things happening and lots of articles to be analyzed, but I did a meta on meta. So what did I find out? And I suppose these things are interesting to you too. So what did they reveal about the higher education discourse? So These articles had a lot of categories, of course, because they did the analysis of who are the major playmakers there in the AI field, where do you do most of the research, and what are the most important applications, and what kind of themes are topical at that particular moment. And based on that, I just in a way used Zawadzki's and Richter's idea that these AI applications and solutions could be put into two major categories. So supporting institutional and administrative level, and then the ones that we are really interested in is how they support teaching and learning. And the four categories that could be found were profiling and prediction. So how you in a way profile the students, how the admissions are organized, the course scheduling and so on. And then the ones that I'm now quite interested in, intelligent tutoring systems. So how you in a way facilitate processes of learning, how you create learning materials and so forth. And the third one was also very important, and something that I'm now looking into, the assessment evaluation. So how you do automated grading feedback, how you give, how you understand how the student has understood and so forth. And then the ones that in a way everybody's talking, if they talk about AI in education, the personalization, that you can in a way make the content personalized for the student and support, for example, students' learning design process. So these were the topics that were discussed quite lengthy in these articles, and all kinds of categories were found, and how the AI machine learning approaches and other approaches were used in these categorizations. But then, as I mentioned, the general question was what has been discussed so far, what have been the main topics. Then I moved on to the last parts of the articles and tried to find out that where are the gaps, where are the research endeavors that should be in a way started now based on their suggestions. And what these article in a way based on my thematic analysis was, they said that there is a need for more sharpening the pedagogical perspective of those AI experimentations. So usually they are quite a lot ICT persons that have been making these studies, so the pedagogical theoretical ideas have been missing there, and the understanding what is learning and what is teaching is missing still there. But I think now they are integrated in the articles based on these suggestions, remembering that how long is a peer review process, and how these articles, when they were made and published, and what has happened prior to their publication. But one thing what's important, what I found out, was the methodological choices of those projects and research projects that have been taken, was that they were very quantitative, and now they ask for qualitative processes, and the research groups should intake other people except those who have been the ones that have done the algorithm and so on and so forth. And the critical reflective, of course, is always asked because of the privacy issues and the ethics. And of course, these articles looked for more technological research themes of AI. So based on these ideas that I found out, I presented them to my colleagues, and they in a way discussed them in our workshop. So the sixth phase of scoping review was this consultation exercise, and we discussed these themes together and found out that what we need to do now is perhaps start working with chatbots that will support the final thesis process at Haaga-Helia, or how we take the ethical management of student data more into consideration, and the community building enabled by AI. These were the themes that are now hanging in the air, but the chatbot thing is something that we are now really working with. And based on those themes that I found out, I made some sort of a clarification to myself that if we work with AI, lots of questions need to be asked. And here are some examples of the questions. So what kind of pedagogical frameworks and models support the AI in higher education context. Why do we use these applications? Why now? And how do they support learning and competence development? And how does this AI fit to the learning culture of the university? And how do we develop the AI literacy of teachers and students when we do these developing processes at the same time? And what are the agencies of teachers and students when we do this kind of change processes? And what kind of AI applications are selected? Who makes the selections? How they align with the pedagogical thinking and the selected infrastructure that higher education already has? And then the questions of privacy and ethics of these applications need to be considered, the ethical responsibility. And what I found out also, this methodological emphasis is also important, that what kind of research teams do we have when we have this kind of project funding, and how do we use this kind of participatory and flexible research projects as well as quantitative processes. And what you have heard me saying is the idea that teachers, teacher educators, students, data scientists, and application designers, they all have to be involved in the process that we get what we want to get out of these projects. So what has happened so far based on these guidelines that in a way I crystallized from my scope and review, that now what we are doing in an AI driver experimentation project is that we are now trying to have a group of members from different backgrounds writing chatbots. They are still this kind of script-based chatbots, and the role of them is to support students' reflective processes, their transversal competencies, and the outlining of the final thesis paper, as I mentioned. So they have been called yours truly and ready. So these have a certain meaning as well. And as Pati-Peter will discuss later, the essay assessment is something that is done now via AI, but we truly hope that the next steps, next autumn, when we move on in our project, these chatbots will have an integrated ChatGPT or an AI integrated into them. So now we are learning in this kind of incremental way the process. So now, with the last few minutes I have, I want to land my presentation by, in a way, going back to the questions that I started with. The question of how ready you are to learn about AI. So using something that you're very familiar, the Bloom's taxonomy, and I found this from an article which was also a systemic analysis and review of how the AI literacy should be developed. So where I'm now, so I have been trying to understand where we're coming from, and now going to apply my knowledge in nice AI applications. So moving on to the top, trying to find out how we can work together and be able to justify why is it now that we have to use AI? What is the value added when we use the AI, and how we take the big societal questions into consideration as well. So this is the first question. And the second question I ask you, how ready are you to learn and teach with AI? We need a framework. So giving frames, and this is one of that I found out. The title of the article was Designing for Learning in an AI World. There you have to, in a way, make yourself very clear what is we're trying to achieve, how are the infrastructures, the algorithms, how they are, in a way, evident and transparent when we talk about our pedagogical philosophy, how this entangled pedagogy, understanding that they work together and move on our processes is taking into consideration. And how do we plan the pedagogical tactics when the students have their epistemic elements, the task, how they are working together in social groups, how they are supported by chats and bots, and what are the artifacts and tools that we are using in order to make affordances for the students to start to learn something new for the future. So this was my contribution to the discussion, and all the materials of the articles can be from the references. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was a great beginning to our webinar. Quite an in-depth presentation for us today. So if it's okay, I do have a question for you, if you're willing
please.
to take it. So it was quite interesting how you were talking about the ethical management and how you're going to use chatbots. And one thing I'd like maybe to ask you is, how do you see the role of course, the ethics of AI in educational context? How do you see that, you know, starting from now? How do you see that for the future?
Oh, right. So my computer is giving me time. Let's see.
Take your time. Take your time.
Yes, I just wonder why it's doing this kind of thing for me now. Now it decided to stop. So the ethical side. So a concrete example now, as we are working with the chatbots, there's lots of questions for students. They have to, in a way, we have to make very, very clear for them that how we are going to use the data, how they will be, in a way, anonymized, and how, in a way, much more carefully, that the students understand that they are really talking with a chatbot. So it's not a person they are talking with. And this kind of things are now taking into consideration, and all the European Union's ideas are also taken into consideration. So it makes us very transparent and clear that what we are doing. So lots of things have to be taken into consideration before we submit something to our students, and of course teachers as well. Yeah.
And how do you see the role of, because you just mentioned it there briefly, and I think it's going to be maybe a question that might come up. How do you see the role of managing the students' data and when dealing with the chatbots and when dealing with AI? Because I know that students' data and how it's being managed is also an issue. How do you see that going forward?
I suppose this calls for this kind of collaboration with those data scientists and the administration and the infrastructure. So I, as a pedagogical person, I have to, in a way, understand that process. So that's why we need these persons who have this kind of understanding of that. How do you, in a way, store the information that it's in a way stored, that it will not have any, how do you say, you will understand some precautions. What is the word I'm looking for? It doesn't hurt the student in the long run. Yes.
Excellent. And I'm going to ask you one more question, because I could ask you more. It's fascinating. How do you see it in the short term, in the extreme short term, when it comes to AI being used by teachers in higher education? How do you see the role of teacher education even in the next couple of years?
Yes.
In the use of AI, how would you summarize that?
That is not a very easy question you're asking me, but at this particular moment, we are, in a way, revising our curriculum or our developmental program. So understanding that this should be included everywhere. So where AI is, it should be discussed, and this AI literacy has to be taken into consideration as well. So you can't, in a way, avoid that at all. So now I suppose that this, as I mentioned, it's time before AI and after AI. Although those who have been reading their scientific articles notice that it's 1980s, 1990s where AI and education, the discussion has started. So this is not that new, but at the particular this moment they are topical in news and everywhere. So because the general public is now involved in the process.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to end your talk on. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to put the presentation together and for answering the questions as well. I really appreciate it. So
thank you, Will. That was nice.
I think a nice platform for us to continue with our webinar today. So thank you very much, Maria. And up next, we're going to maybe get a bit more, I would say, practical, maybe input into the role of AI in students. And I'd like to welcome Pasi Petäjä, who is the CEO of Eximia OU, and he's going to give us a talk about AI applications for tutoring students and providing personalized online learning. And once again, if you have any questions, please just put them in the YouTube chat and I will direct them to Pasi. So Pasi, if you could please share your screen and then you can crack on. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think so.
Yeah, there you go.
I have it now. All right. Okay. If I'm making this a bit bigger, is this good? Everybody can see this now.
That's perfect,
well.
Pasi. Thank you very much.
All right. And welcome as well from my side and Eximia tutor side as well. And couple of things before we go. I'm telling a few words about myself and our company and those kind of things. Then it's good to understand why we have done certain things, what we have done. And the basic is Eximia Oy. It's a gram course company. We started 2000. And started this company in our kitchen with my wife and a third person. And after it has started 2000, I stayed away because, you know, in family someone has to be in real work. So I was in work, and company started well, and until came 2016. But I'm telling that more what happened then. A couple of words about me and my background. As I said, I have been somewhere else. I have been work in other projects than in this company until 2016. So basically, I started my career in Germany in 1990, somewhere there. And then I came to Finland and made my first biotech company. And then after 5-6 years, I sold the rest shares I had that time, and then I have been working in industry experience from the consultancy business and food business and biotech business. And then little by little we came to situation we had a consultancy company as well behind everything this Eximia and this, and 2016 we came to position that Eximia shares, all the shares were transacted to our family. But and now we are focusing mostly Eximia Tutor, and basically in technically it is Eximia AI Technologies, spin-off of the Eximia Oy. And this spin-off is making the business broad, and home and domestic business is still making in Eximia Oy. But our goal is to help students and as well teachers to optimize their work in daily work and make that easier as possible now and future. And let's go and see what are the next things then. And yeah, we are concentrating on text essays and math assignments and exams in this our assessment technology. And the story is quite complicated to tell. That's why I am more or less concentrating what we have done. But before that, there has been certain very keen on lines and bigger issues. In previous presentation was question about this how. I don't know what it was, by the way. It was anyway. It comes later. But yeah, let's go now and concentrate on this ABC. This is now telling and showing us the construction how we have done the things. And first of all, we have this A as associations. It means there are our clients and consumers. Who are mostly related to LMS, learning manufacture systems. There are several of those in the world. We all know Moodle and Canvas and everything those, and many times schools and education organizations, they have already one of these, or they perhaps using couple of these kind of LMS systems. And the total world is changing perhaps as well in Finland. We don't know yet. Finland is Moodle world, but it is as well said or estimated that someday Canvas will as well coming to Finnish market. We don't know yet. We will see that. But where we started, right, actually it is the C part. And the C part is consumers. And a couple of things behind, we have done our cram courses for 20 years, and we have sold these courses to our client and consumers in high school level, and then while they are making their matriculation examination, and then we have had in Finland pass exam to university. So our role is there to help young students to get to university. And as well, we have an agency business, and we are sending the young students to other universities abroad. But this is telling one of our strategical things that why we have started to make this kind of consumer department, can I say so, or the ideas to offer consumer products. There is technical reasons as well. But B is business, corporation world. I'm coming from that consultancy, and I'm understanding quite a lot, certain things, what is there in business. And as well, Eximia, additionally, cram course organizer, we have been quite big adult education organizer. And adult education centers were very big clients of us past 5 years, for example. And then we have these learning platforms. And how this everything is working, we have our own program, this real program and user interface. It is in AWS cloud somewhere. And then we have additional, it's remote version of that is the assessment server, where happens every intellectual actions. And there is the connection between Eximia Tutor and assessment server. And technically, what we have done, it is that while we are offering LMS, it is that we have made the integration, and integration is under this GDPR, and we are not sending any identification information there, so it's very can I say safe in that sense. And and now these are the same way, same time. These are the products we have. Consumer products, it's our own school, and because we have been for years as well the publishing company. Once you start to make this kind of technology, you have to make it in the real world. Okay, we had publications and we had material, so we started to make the school, and we made high school, virtual high school, so the students can make their studies and repeat there and get immediate feedback of their studies. But let's go now more what has happened during the last years, and this is telling quite a lot of things. So 2016, parent company was in a very bad cash flow crisis, and of course then usually company are sold, and we bought as a family 50%, so we are owning after 2016 we are owning our company. And what happened then, turnaround management, a bit of that, but as well we made new strategy. I saw that time that okay, Finnish we had in education we had very good reputation, and our technological understanding was so high that okay, why don't we combine these and let's make something new. And we started to make, and then we had very much idea what to do, and we didn't know it in first hand what we start to do, and we tested quite a lot of things. We use different kind of coupons got from the Business Finland fundraiser in Finland. And yeah, little by little we understood that because we make these Scrum courses, that every night, there had and our teachers, they had some, 250, the exams to make the evaluate or the assessment. It was a really big job for them, and they were starting annoying us, and it wasn't nice. And in the end of the day, they asked more salary and more money and everything. It was up for us. It was a pain in the ass somehow. And then in these discussions, we decided, why the hell we don't make assessment service for ourselves? So get rid of this problem and get the immediate results and feedback to students. And that was the first idea to start with. And we started to make that in math. And same time, somewhere there, 2018, we had project Mr. Pasi Tapanainen, who is nowadays in our company CDO. And he brought technology, and we combined this with mathematics to this text essay assessment technology. He had done for years. Nowadays, he has done more than 30 years in University of Helsinki in top research groups and Academy of Finland top research groups, these kind of innovations and research. So we have combined our forces together for years now, and now we have done the latest version what we have now. But before that, we started to make this tool for make the assessment. But we realized we have this material, we have everything this, okay, why don't we make the courses? Because same time, there was the legislation change in Finland, and before, everyone had to go through the pass exam to get to university. But then it changed 2019, 2018, 50% of the people got inside the university with scores of the matriculation examination. So 50%, half of the potential market were collapsed from us. And the point was moving then that time more to high school. So we started to make then high school product and this virtual school. And we made all courses, more than 60. Nowadays, we have more than 100 of courses there in high school in Finland. And it was a big thing, but we wanted to be part of that, and our background is in consumer business, so we started to make that. And then after this legislation changed, 2020, Corona came. And we had then that time the idea that, because we understand 10 languages in our technology, we had the idea to make this to first in Swedish and English. And we had already contracts with teachers and instructors all around the world to make the content for us, but everything collapsed. Then we started to think about what we do next. It was somewhere there, spring 20. And during the next summer, we decided, why the hell we don't make, why we wouldn't make by ourselves a program to make the translation of the courses, Finnish language courses to other languages. It is that easy what it sounds. Once you have a course, there are text, there are pictures, there are all kind of stuff, other stuff, and the text is never very poor. It's dirty. There is modeling forms and everything. That the idea to make this kind of program was actually work to make how to clean the code. And after we had done that code cleaning program, so take everything away, there was the poor text, HTML text. And then that translation was quite easy. And we made this translation project then by ourselves in technical way. And then it was very nice because we got easily, our level as raw translation to 70-80%. Comparing to how ready it was. Then we hired new teachers and new instructors to make proofreading, fact checking, and editing. And last thing was that we had to model it to British and then the Swedish syllabus. So we had to adjust a bit, the content and everything. For example, which kind of assignments we have and everything that. And we had, for example, mathematics. We needed to add some algebra and those things because in UK it's more algebra. Finally, we came to situation that in March 22 we launched the beta version, and why 3rd of the March? Because we were late. Our idea was to turn off 21, and then we started to collect, the users, and then after the summer we had more than 1,000 users in Eximia Tutor, and same time we started to think about that, how we gonna make the business in the future. And 22 summer was the aim to make the strategy. Eximia has behind it, it has certain fund, and our bank was saying that they need to get that fund back, and so we were some difficulties then, and then we realized, okay, we don't have to make anything else. We're just starting to sell 22 autumn. And then we were, among other our clients, we were in contact to Haaga-Helia University, and we started to make then cooperation. Now we have done the first project, and everything has gone quite easily with Haaga-Helia. Many thanks for you guys there. And now we are going to AQA and AP to US as a STEM subjects. We are offering them via our own shop and this eximiatutor.com application. And we are looking for new partners, international partners, high schools, universities, organizations, education organizations, and brokers as well. And then I had the idea to show shortly how this works. What do you say, guys? Do I have a time to show? It takes 1 minute.
Yeah, I think that would be useful to see a practical example.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on.
You have about, let's say, five minutes or so. We also have a question for you as well, so we'll try and balance those things. And you're muted, or we can't hear you.
Okay, hang on.
Now you're back. We got you.
Okay. Okay, this is from our own program. For example, this is the one we have done in cooperation with Haaga-Helia. There's a question about AI technology and the ideas there, and which are the, according to certain article, which are the technology drivers and certain things. And then the thing is that I'm selecting this and question, and then I'm answering. Okay, now it was not that. It is this. I wrote this. Copy. All right. I'm taking this first way, like this. Okay, the student has answered now the question, and he is sending this, and now we got, okay, one thing only went correctly, and now these things were missing, and now I take this, hang on. Copy. And I make this again. And now there is everything inside. Okay, it gives immediately now the feedback to you, and you understand what you were missing firstly, and you can repeat that and read that from the theory or somewhere else. But this is the basically what happens there. And I think so. Our time is now ending, and if you have any questions and you want to be in contact somehow later on, I'm ready to ready to answer. And yeah, that was it. And thank you, my time.
Yeah, thanks, Pasi. You can stop sharing because you're sharing
Sorry about that.
multiple times. No problem. So I have one question for you, and it's basically, so what do you think are the next steps in developing AI-based assessment systems?
It's a good question. We have our test platform, as they were telling there. Maria was telling before that okay, GPT chat is interesting, but instead of GPT chat, there's many design-based things what GPT chat is using, and our CDO, Mr. Tapanainen, is very focused on those, and we will start perhaps take these things to use as well. So we can tell the things to students and everybody else more exactly. That's perhaps one thing, but then we have to realize that the big thing is where is the border or the line between the certain syllabus and free open data, what is there in a general web. And nowadays quite many education is framed by the syllabus. So they have to now make the decision, will they given out this syllabus somehow, or are they trying, universities and the schools, are they trying to keep them inside, and this is the content they are trying to use, or will they give out? I don't know what happens, but there certainly will come to some talks and what is the way. Certain universities have already said we can use the GPT chat, but yeah, it's very, very, very. I don't know what happens. We have as well this in our platform, but we have one couple of ideas about that, but you understand, perhaps I don't want to talk about those yet.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for the answer. And it's kind of, I want to ask a question that's a little bit related to what I asked Mary as well. Of course, you're dealing with students and student data. So what's your kind of methods, or how do you see the handling of student data when it comes to assessments and evaluations using AI?
This is a good question. One of the original ideas was that once we have gathered the data, it's very interesting, and the idea was to tell the students that once you have made the studies in a certain level, and now if you make one small step to upwards, upgrade your knowledge, you will get perhaps you will scores in matriculation examination, for example, this better score, and what it means to your the opportunities to get the certain for example in medical sciences or juridical studies, or you have better chances. So it is some kind of estimation. And of course, we cannot guarantee nothing, but it is some kind of, the advice and some kind of prognosis, and give the idea for the students and motivate them to make the studies as hard as they can.
Okay, thank you, Pasi. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us about Eximia OU and about your evaluation software. And if you don't mind sticking around, we might have some further questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, Pasi.
Thank you.
I would like to move on then to our final two speakers for today. So we are going to have, and just let me get it up here. So we're going to have Margarita Romero from University Côte d'Azur and Lauren Heiser, also from University Côte d'Azur. And together you're both going to co-host and co-present a talk on creative uses of AI in education. And once again, I will say to our audience that if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will ask Margarita and Lauren directly. And also there are some questions that I will ask at the end of the presentations as more of a general overview questions as well. But otherwise, please, Margarita and Lauren, share your screens and take it away. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for the invitation. Then Margarida Romero, full professor at the University Côte d'Azur. I'm a kind of ambassador, then working on the learning science, but also with a foot on the computer science, working and collaborating with colleagues also in different interdisciplinary approaches. I'm very happy also to co-host this presentation with Laurent Geyser.
Thank you, Margarita. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad to be with you today to co-host this presentation.
Then we will introduce firstly what are we considering these creative uses of AI in education, and this is really going into the continuation of also Maria presentation because this entangled pedagogy approach, considering the emergent way we can design activities, and we need to consider technology from a perspective in which the different actors need to understand, learn, and to identify new ways of integrating these opportunities is something that we fully agree on. And we want to thank also Pasi for the presentation on this very interesting tool, and we will look also at the possibilities of supporting creative pedagogies through this type of tools. Then we have very good news. During the past 2 years, we have been working with more than 20 actors in 3 different countries, and mostly colleagues in research labs and associations and outreach activities in France, but also in Belgium and also in Quebec, Canada. And after these 2 years of intensive work, we have now published a white book on artificial intelligence and education. Then it's an opportunity to learn French, isn't it? Because this white book is published in French, but we hope we will have the opportunity to share the key insights in English and maybe other languages in the future. And you can have the link on this white book on the chat. And we are sharing here for everyone, and maybe William, in case you want to share on the YouTube channel, this is also super welcome. This is an open access book that has been developed within this working group that was supported by the Ministry of Education in France through the Digital Transformation Unit of the Ministry. Then what we have learned from that is that there's a high diversity of uses of AI in education. And then what we consider is that maybe all not these uses are engaging in the same creative way the students and the learners at different levels, from primary education to even higher education and vocational education. Then one of the axes of one of the perspective we have been taking for considering these creative uses of technologies is the creative engagement. Then in front of technologies, you can be just passive, then going through Netflix things and other type of tools that are proposing things, and even maybe you are not aware about the algorithm and what happens on the other side, as Mirja was explaining, that you need to be aware about these aspects, but this is not always the case. In other contexts, there's an interaction, and this interaction behaves in an adaptive way, and that helps to adapt to the learner's needs, to personalize the system, to provide specific hints or specific feedback. But what interests us the most is how teachers and learners and educational stakeholders can consider these technologies in order to be creative in the way they are creating new teaching activities, but also new activities for learning, either at the individual level, level 3, or at the content co-creation level, or the 3rd level, the participatory co-creation perspective. Then this is the red line and the common point of the work we have developed it during the last 10 years, then not on AI initially, we have gone through STEM education, then science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics education, but also on creative problem solving with educational robotics, and now science these past 3 years on the creative uses of AI. Then just a snapshot on how this relates to AI. This is also a passive consuming approach on AI systems in education. It's just about considering the learner as a passive consumer, and then the system will facilitate things for the teacher or for the learner, but they are not aware about how it works, and they cannot be adapt these systems or uses in a way that in a specific way. The system is just being used in the way that has been designed, but the end user is not engaged in any kind of interaction. But there's also this interactive consuming approach, and we are strong on using the terms consuming, but this is what the persons are engaging in these systems, even if these systems also brings value to certain tasks and contexts. And these systems are especially adaptive systems in which, depending on the learner model, the task model, and the different types of models that are integrating, there's more or less help and better adaptations that are being integrated. But what is really interesting on the context of the teachers training and the training of the smart tech students as edtech professionals and researchers also in the area of technology enhanced learning is how we can consider, understand, acculturate us to AI systems in order to have a basic understanding of what these systems do, and then use these systems in order to solve more complex problems or to create new things. It's about this human AI collaboration in order to go farther in our personal, group, or societal objectives. And this is really doing echo also on Merja presentation on these approaches. And just an element on how we do that from a research perspective is also about having we need for going through these data intensive approaches, a large corpus of data and interdisciplinary collaboration. And this is something we are really proud of, because when focusing on a specific learning task and creative problem solving tasks, we have the possibility to engage a diversity of colleagues from different epistemological, methodological perspective, and be able to collaborate together in advancing research on creative problem solving. Then the last aspects before giving the mic to Laurent, then currently we are now a big corpus of data that is developed with this joint collaboration with the computer scientist and the learning scientist. And our big objective is to be able to succeed in this interdisciplinary collaboration, in which learning scientists are also considering computational approaches, but also computational approaches are not just reinventing how people learn, but taking consideration the models and the frameworks that already exist on the learning science. This is not an easy way, but this is a very interesting way, and we are having now different results on this project, and we are really happy about this perspective that are on our side super important for advancing on the integration of AI in education. Then I give the mic to my colleague Laurent.
Thank you, Margarida, and let me also thank the organizers today. It's a big pleasure to be with you today. So, well, I'm going to carry on with what Margarida has tried to describe from theoretical background point of view by insisting on some feedbacks from our pre-service teachers courses here at the Pre-Service Teacher Institute in Nice. And as you can see here, I think it's important, but it's been mentioned so far to make a distinction between teaching with AI and learning AI. But I would like to say that even if those two dimensions are very different, it's important to combine them within the training of our pre-service teachers. Indeed, we do believe that the more teachers will understand how AI works, and the more they will accept to use it in class with their students to expand the students' creativity. So therefore, I think this is one result from our research group is to say that explicability is at the center of our proposal of pedagogical creative uses that will benefit the future pedagogy of our pre-service teachers. So explicability is very important. If you want to find out more about the material that we use with our pre-service teachers, there is a link that I'm going to share with William now. And if you want to have a look at our material, feel free to give it a go, and it will be with pleasure that we can give you more feedbacks on this type of material. So Margarita, we're going to move on to the next slide, please. And well, we have decided to show you, thanks to this example, the way we train our pre-service teachers with AI. Here, as you can see here, this is practically the first time they are aware that they use an AI is when they use ChatGPT. So what did we ask them to do? Here, our pre-service teachers have to ask ChatGPT to provide them with a lesson plan, to get this work done by an AI. As you can see, their question on the left side of the slide is very specific, long enough so that ChatGPT will propose an example of a lesson plan on the right side of your screen, which is very similar to a preparation sheet, which they will then have to examine to use a didactical control. For example, they will control all the proposals, for example, the timing that is proposed, the type of activity that is proposed, the assessment that is proposed to keep, and then they will use their didactical control, which means their professional glance, to improve the proposals of ChatGPT, and then be aware that they can use AI to as a sort of a benchmark, then to expand creativity in class. We think that this is a good exercise to start with pre-service teachers for two main reasons. The first reason is that proposals are not magic, and they depend on the ability to provide good prompts to the machine. The second reason is that they understand that the proposals are not accurate enough to let a machine replace teachers. So there are many examples in the Padlet that has just been shared with you. So if you want to find out more, of course, the Padlet is yours. Let's move on to the next slide, Margarita. Thank you very much for handling this. So in this slide, we are going to share you with another relevant example of how we train pre-service teachers to understand some of the technical issues, and probably more than that, as regards to AI. In this example, pre-service teachers were asked to ask a conversational agent, usually Siri, Cortana, or Alexa, to draw an object. They usually start by asking the conversational agent a question such as, can you help me draw a tree, for example, or can you help me draw a rectangle or something like that? The answers that are provided by Siri, Alexa, or Cortana are often disappointing. So the best thing that Siri or Alexa can do is to answer like a search engine on the internet. And then, as you can see here, the reaction of our pre-service teachers is very important. It annoys me, it bypasses everything. He has been snubbing me for a while. He doesn't understand anything. After several tries, they finally solved the problem by treating the AI differently. That is to say, by treating the AI like a limited intelligence, which can do something very specific. So the answer is, give me a number between 0 and 3, and they have to prepare all the possible answers in advance. The machine will answer at random. For example, pick a number between 0 and 3. They know in advance that the number 3 matches with a specific color. And this is the most funny part of the activity. Another example, Margarita, which is going to be our next slide. We're going to concentrate on another game, which was adapted from Marie Duflo. And before that, I forgot, of course, to give you the feedbacks from our pre-service teachers after they have used the previous game. We must do everything in its place. You have to get around it. We have to create a recipe or a legend. He can't have the skills to answer us. So it's very important. I think those quotes are very important to share with you the fact that after 1 or 2 hours using those creative scenarios, they have the idea that the AI is not magic, and that there are 2 types of intelligence: human on the one side, technical on the other side. So, Margarita, we're going to move on to another experiment here at in our pre-service teacher school in Nice. Is a game that was adapted from Marie Duflo, and it's called Play the Neuron. It's also aimed, like the other games, to make our pre-service teacher infer that an AI is amoral. So how do we achieve that? First, we have to control the activity and add to it a research device. So the research is based on this. You have to equip all the participants with camera glasses, which is going to be our next slide, Margarita. Okay, so every participant is equipped with camera glasses, and then they have to be tied to one another with ropes. Okay, they also have a role card. So, for example, they identified the limitations of their role or the limitations of their brain. For example, I only react if I see this or that shape, or I only react if I see this or that color. For example, I only react when I am standing on, for example, the middle layer of the neural network. I only react if I receive 2 information from another neuron or another participant. At the end, the last student has to say snap, okay, because he has received 2 similar information. So what we have tried to do, because the students were equipped with camera glasses, is that they were filming their own experience playing the neuron, and then we had an interview with them. Okay, so in this interview, which is stimulated recall interview technique, okay, they have to describe the experiment that they had when they had to play this experiment. In this slide, we asked one of the participants, the last one, the last neuron, who had to say snap, okay, to describe the conditions she was in during the experiment. And I'm glad to share with you some of the things she said during this interview. For example, she said, I realized that I said snap even if I couldn't understand how the other neurons reacted. Another very relevant thing to show you that it's important before teaching with AI, it's important to learn AI and to make a specific, a very important distinction between human intelligence and technical intelligence. After a while, I was aware that the sensors or the captors were detecting shapes or colors, but at first I did not understand anything, okay? In other words, she was reacting, she was saying snap, but she didn't understand why she had to say snap. And at first I was afraid I would fail, but when I realized that there was nothing difficult about this task, I forgot my fear. So I would like to now to come to the conclusion, and I'm going to read it slowly with you, which I think are very important ideas. Nobody is indifferent to AI. So it's important, we think that it's important to train our relationships to those technical devices. The way we reflect to AI gives way to its potential as well as its limitations. We are pretty much convinced through this research group, Getenum Scolia, that our well-being depends on the quality of our awareness to AI, even if in a world that is dominated by acceleration, to quote Armut Rosa 2022. Therefore, the music, our inner music must be trained, and it's certainly not enough because there are many other aspects such as political stakes, for example, but we try to concentrate on what we can do with pre-service teachers to encourage them to create creative pedagogical uses that are going to train the awareness of their own pupils in class. So what we have seen is that AI in education can definitely expand creativity. The example of ChatGPT is relevant, and the examples I show you is relevant about this. Okay, meaning emancipation versus alienations somehow. But this idea also requires to look at digital education through educational stakes. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Margarita and Lauren, for that talk. I think you covered quite a lot there. So thank you very much. We got a few questions in the chat as well, which I think I will get to in a second. They're kind of broad questions. And then, but I think specifically for Margarita and Lauren, I'd like to ask, and this is maybe more towards Margarita, regarding the adoption of AI levels that you presented, what is your opinion? Do digital natives, so young adults, have some special skill or advantage related to the use of AI compared to older people?
Yeah, this is a research question that has been posed several years ago. We started exploring this question with our colleagues at Concordia University because there was a specific topic on how older persons relate to technology. And then good news, diversity is in all ages. Then it's not because persons are younger that they have more interest with technology. And the other thing is the type of uses of technology. It's not because you are a serial liker in social media that you have computational thinking skills. This is a very important aspect, then understanding how a computer works, how text editing is done, how data is processed, all these aspects that was required for using a computer decades ago are no longer required using technologies today. Then this is there are new challenges for younger generations. First is to be aware that they probably don't know all they need to know to understand technology, despite they are heavy users of this technology. And this requires our educational systems to start very early in helping both learners and teachers that are also on the young generation. Our pre-service teachers are very young, our smartest students are also very young, and they need to be aware about what is missing on their current uses of technology. And also there's a societal and citizenship aspect that is important, very important on that, is about we need to make sure we understand things in order to regulate them and to decide, especially at the parent and teacher level, what is okay and what is not okay to share, and how to help kids on that. And I will say challenges are super important now, and we cannot assume that the digital natives, the term has even been very controversial in research, require also to learn about AI and other technologies.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer. And I think it's a quite a difficult, complicated, challenging situation to think that I think you can't answer it too quickly, but I think there's more research needed for that one. And I have a question for Laura, and I thought it was quite interesting how you can see AI from both sides, from the teaching and the learning. And then one question on that actually is from Passy. Do you think are the students and the teachers ready to accept AI-based solutions?
Well, I think it's a very good question, but I didn't show you any examples of how we can use AI for example, for improving, for example, French spelling, because I speak from the French system, or to improve mathematics. But we do believe that the more explicability they will get from AI, the more aware they will be about how a neural network functions. The more, for example, probably clever they will be with the new software that were implemented. So far that we know that if we run out of this explicability, the public spendings on software will be undermined by teacher saying that, well, we don't need that. Okay, I've been doing that for so many years. Why are they insisting so much on those new softwares? So if you want to have good and fair public spendings on new digital devices such as AI, I think we need to make, or to have our teachers of the 21st century make the good decisions, because they know exactly that a particular software functions like this or like that.
Okay, thank you very much. And actually one question just came in on that point. So how do you think we can convince students about the importance of AI? And maybe that question could also be opened up. We have maybe 5 or 6 minutes left, so that question can be taken by anybody. How do we convince the students about the importance of AI? And Laura, and you can take it, or anybody else, just answer as you see fit.
I can let another guest to tackle this question, but I think it's important to have sufficient training hours during the pre-service training, which in France lasts 2 years, with only 30 or 40 hours, okay, to illustrate, okay, things with teachers. But I think it's important to say also that AI is not something too technical. What I mean is that the other academic disciplines, subjects, can also have a role to play, okay, with AI. So it's important not to say that, okay, if you use AI as a teacher, you become a science teacher, or you will become a technology teacher, which is not the case, okay? So in order to convince them to use AI, I think it's important to insist on citizenships, as we said, on prudence uses, as we said, and it's important to see it on the long term, which is very important as well.
Thank you.
And I would love to continue from what Laurent said about the idea for seeing the future. So if we start the educational process with the end in mind, so what is the future? What kind of world the students are entering? So we have to open up the horizons and make the uncertainty something that they have to work with, because we don't know which kinds of professions there will be. So that's why the educational process should have these kind of uncertainty aspects included into it. So it doesn't make a world that is in a way strict and something that is self-evident, but the idea is that, as Margarita mentioned, this kind of playfulness, that you play with things, and if you play, they make a mark. You will remember those emotions you had, and this kind of understanding makes the confidence, and based on confidence you have then competence when you in a way have been working with them. So that's my take on that. I suppose Pasi has something to say.
Yeah, one thing is that once they play, they test. In our point of view, you know, they are, our students will get, you know, that service to use. They are trying to test how well it gives them, you know, the good grades, and how well it can know something. It's like a play. It's a testing that, and it doesn't go broken. And then perhaps they little by little start to realize what it understands. Same times, ChatGPT everybody of us have got some, you know, the bad answers or very peculiar answers while we have made not so certain questions. Or perhaps the thing is we need to concentrate on making the questions, and we have to know the thing a little bit. We have to be a certain kind of expertise in that branch. So that's a good combination then.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, sadly, and I was hoping that we'd be able to have more time for this conversation, because this is fascinating. But there's one question that came up that I would like to, I think is quite topical, and one that maybe people are interested in, which relates to what you were just talking is, and it's a big one. But how can universities implement and use software or AI like ChatGPT specifically in reality? Because it's happening now, it's here, but how can universities implement it, do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's a good thing to say we are going to implement it instead of prohibiting ChatGPT. So the first thing is this, okay? So it's a very good thing if universities are starting to think of how we can implement it instead of banning ChatGPT. And I think, well, it gives us a great opportunity to create creative pedagogical uses, and maybe to ask students more than before. Because, for example, you can ask ChatGPT so many things, and then you can ask students, for example, to give more, to check the sources, the references, to add more to it. And I think it's a great opportunity to expect more from our students than before.
Great.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's an important thing. It's that we can universities can say, "Oh, this is complicated, then let's not do anything on that." But the issue is also about availability. Then there's an equity also aspect in the access of tools. Then at a certain point, if students are using that, we need to engage and to discuss the uses that are okay and not okay. And the ethical aspects of that, but also provide these tools in a proactive way, because otherwise some students will have it and others will not have it, and there will be even more equity difficulties on these aspects.
Great, thank you very much. We're actually spot on time now. sadly, we have quite a few interesting questions. Could I ask one more question, do you think, or should we finish it up? Because I think this is a nice question to end the discussion on. What real contributions does AI offer to teaching and learning processes, in your opinion? And just go for it. And this will be the last question of our session. Who wants to take that? So, what real contributions does AI offer to teaching and learning processes?
If I start, I would in a way think that if it can be automated, it will be automated. So where do we need the human intelligence? Where do we need the ideas that make the future better? So understanding that it provides us tools, processes that make it efficient to do certain things like administration and things that can be used where you can use AI is good, but then you have to in a way decide where the human touch is the one that in a way prevails. But I throw the ball to Margarita. You had something on your mind.
Oh, I will just say that this is a complicated question because it will depend on the domain, on the task, etc. Then that means that there's work to be done by every faculty and every person on how, in my specific domain, in this course with the students, this could help to advance certain tasks. Then there's fascinating arena to a new playground to explore, but we cannot have like generic answer for all domains and all the tasks. And there's a need that everyone has these acculturations, start also exploring at which point is interesting and how they need to be regulated.
From our side, I could say that as the assessment and to get the feedback to students as soon as possible, perhaps will help them to make studies and give the motivation, more motivation.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think that through education, we can tackle AI by helping our students to measure the consequences of using AI. And in order to do that and to make our students aware of the consequences of using AI, it's important that teachers use their main tool, which is pedagogy and creative uses of AI.
I think that's a fantastic answer and a fantastic way to finish up this webinar. So I would like to thank all of our speakers today for taking the time to prepare your presentations and for coming here. Thank you to Maria. Thank you to Pasi and to Lauren and Margarita. Also thank you to the Ulysses team and Hage Heli in the background, Ariella Maki and Thomas Macher for helping me. And for those of you who are watching, this webinar will be uploaded onto YouTube later. And there's also the possibility to look at our previous webinar on human-centric AI. So I think that's about it. Thank you, everybody. It's been a really interesting pleasure to listen to your research and your answers and your presentations. And for those of you watching, if you're interested in more information about Ulysses and Compass, of course, you can find us on LinkedIn and ulysses.eu. So other than that, the sun is actually coming out here in Finland for a change. It's about the second time this month I've seen it. So I think we'll let it go at that. So thank you very much. And yeah, stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.